I've managed to get rid of almost all my dependencies. Good. And I've also weakened my attachment to people. However, I still can't shake off the sadness of being alone, and I've never quite managed to earn the right to love. I've experienced so many unrequited feelings that I've lost count. Every single one of my relationships either fell apart or never even started. I've asked myself this question during practices, but I still can't find the answer. Is there a way to earn this right? Yes, of course there is. First of all, you need to clarify why this kind of dissonance has arisen in your life, and why this particular right has been denied to you. In other words, you'll need to carry out a certain form of diagnosis, whether psychological, magical, or through divination, whichever method you prefer. In general, use any means available to gather information, drawing it from wherever you can. What matters most in this case is identifying the root cause and tracing where it originated, because the root cause can vary. For instance, it might be the result of a harmful magical influence. This happens when a program is implanted into your consciousness, thereby distorting your original program. It makes it incomplete. It leaves it vulnerable. Imagine, for instance, that you're a person with a good education, of a high caste, with a significant existential volume. Yet this program causes you to project to those around you that you're nothing but a penniless loser, an ignorant fool, or worse still, a heartbreaker, or a gold digger chasing after other people's husbands or inheritance. Such a program can project absolutely anything. You might be one thing, yet others may perceive you as something completely different. It's an illusion spell, a distortion of perception. If this turns out to be the root of the problem, it can be dealt with through ritual cleansing. There are methods for this, and believe me, getting rid of something like that is the easiest part. A spell cast by one person can always be undone by another. That's simply how it works. The second reason is that you may be carrying something I wouldn't quite call a self-imposed curse, although it's very close, but rather an internal predisposition about how all your relationships are supposed to unfold. It's a kind of mental program, and your subconscious, clinging to this program, automatically rejects anything that doesn't fit within its framework. So your partner must be a certain height, a certain weight, have a certain eye color. And if someone doesn't meet those criteria, you simply won't notice them at all. Incidentally, this happens quite often. It's especially common if a woman's consciousness was not formed independently through personal experience or the study of people and the outside world. But instead, under the influence of rigid beliefs within her family, cultural background, religious upbringing, or some other external pressure. It's a frequent occurrence. In this case, the program exists within you, and then it starts working in the opposite direction. If in the first case, those around you saw you as a complete disaster, here it is you who starts seeing others as a total mess. Yet the result is exactly the same. I don't need anything. The world isn't worthy of my lofty ideals. This is the second level of complexity. Why? Because here, you'll have to work not only with your psyche, but also with family karma and childhood patterns. And that requires a much longer and, shall we say, more conscious kind of work. The next, and more complex, reason for this phenomenon is a karmic task. And what might that involve? The thing is, the right to love isn't such a cheap or easily granted right in this world. Although it might seem like a natural human need, at the most basic level, a person's natural need is merely to satisfy passion and lust, and perhaps to produce offspring. And on that purely animal level, that's all there is. However, on a higher level, the level of consciousness that lies between biology and divine origin, it's neither simple nor cheap. Because the right to love, and love itself at that level, is the ability to perceive absolutely everything without denying any of it, to take in everything without rejecting a single thing. And at this stage, once you begin to understand not only how rights in this world are formed, but also the cost of those rights, this task no longer seems so simple, and its absence no longer feels so offensive. Because reaching a state of such love is only possible when all other rights have already been realized. And how many currents of forces are there? Perhaps our colleagues could find an illustration of these currents, and we'll go through it together now. Each current of forces essentially represents a right to access that current. These are the rights we're talking about. There are 7 currents of forces. The current of creation is the highest, and the current of love is the second most difficult. Meanwhile, the currents of health and money are considered the simplest and the cheapest, meaning they're the easiest to reach. Now, colleagues, take a look at this chart. This shows the hierarchy of the currents. Starting from the top, we have the current of creation, followed by the currents of knowledge and love. Then come the currents of power and fortune, and finally, the currents of money and health. There they are. Thank you, colleagues. You asked about one of the highest currents. It ranks second only to the current of creation, which means you must first gain the rights to all the currents below it and consolidate those rights. This doesn't mean that you must go through stages of power or prove your luck by buying lottery tickets every day, getting rich, or curing yourself of every illness. Not at all. Because having the right to a current means being able to access it whenever you need it, and to refrain from using it when you don't. That's what a right is, the ability to freely direct certain currents of forces. And only then might this kind of love, the one you've been waiting for, become available to you. We're talking about a very high form of love here. The kind of love that, in our tradition, is called unconditional love, love without conditions. But before you meet someone with whom you can experience such love, remember, it's not a one-way street. Unconditional love isn't just what your partner gives you, it's also what you give your partner. In fact, I'd say even more. If your partner doesn't have this kind of love for you, that's no reason for you to deny it within yourself. Because love belongs to the person themselves, not to the object of their love. This is unconditional acceptance, regardless of whether you might receive the kind of response or quality you're hoping for, the kind of response that one usually expects to be mutual. Your ability and capacity to experience the highest feeling in the world should not depend on whether you receive anything in return. And if you wish to consolidate the right to love for yourself, you must first come to realize that you already possess this right, because you have already experienced it. But time and again, you voluntarily refuse it when you don't receive an adequate response. If you need a response, then it's called something else. It's a relationship meant for a purpose, such as family, sex, companionship, or joint learning. But the word, the state, and the right to love, which truly involves both the right to love and love itself, imply a completely different state of consciousness. Therefore, it's very important to be clear about the terminology here. Do you truly need a partner? Or do you need the right to the highest form and greatest power of magically unveiling your own potential? Because at this level, at the level of the currents of forces, it is within the currents of knowledge and love that the magical core begins to open. Not fully, but it starts to unfold. The magical power itself is the current of creation, but it must somehow enter the mind, which means that either the power of love or the power of knowledge must be open. Try to view the story of your life as one that reveals to you, day by day, the rights you truly possess. And your entire problem lies in your inability to properly identify those rights. You keep calling them by the wrong names. Try looking at your life from a different angle. Consider what has always come to you and what you've consistently turned away from. That's the next step, and it may well be the root cause of the problem. You simply can't recognize the rights you already have, or those not yet accessible to you, because you haven't yet acquired or earned all the lower-level, more basic rights. If it's the second case, become aware of the level at which your rights are still lacking. Then start working on gaining those rights. You can't put a roof on a house before the load-bearing walls have been built. First, you need to build those supporting walls, because these higher rights require a very precise, rigid, and stable foundation for your personality and consciousness. Because if that foundation is unstable, you might reject these rights once again. And perhaps not in the same way as before, but in a moment of strong emotion, you might utter some very weighty ritual phrase, declaring that you're giving them up forever. And you will be heard. And those rights will be taken from you. Your life will immediately become easier. You'll have an enormous number of friends and lovers who come and go in your life. But I assure you, it won't satisfy you. Absolutely not. So take a slightly different look at your life. When it comes to the art of freeing yourself from dependencies, you must identify them, to name them clearly and precisely. If any remain, they must be described accurately. Because if the description is wrong, the reality will be wrong too. The reality formed around you, by you, and for you. Well, that's probably all I can say for now.